The best advice is in the book that I make all of my writing students buy. It's called Bird by Bird by Anne Lamott.
Oh, yeah.
And the best advice I ever received that completely changed my writing process is the concept of the first draft. You can bleep that out. So I will say the crappy first draft, but it is, in fact, the title of the chapter is the first draft. And
Yes,
the
it
fact
is.
that in order to be a good writer, you have to let yourself be a bad writer. And I was such a perfectionist when I was a kid and a high schooler and even a college student that the idea that I would write something bad was like paralyzing to me, and it really kept me away from the process that would eventually serve me.
That was the voice of playwright and theater professor Jennifer Blackmer. You heard a quick little as well from my second guest, Meg Crane, who invented the first take-home pregnancy test. Not the science part, but she took the science and made it available to women to do at home. We're going to get into that like crazy because it's such a cool story. But yes, I am so delighted to have a double dip this week again. Jennifer Blackmer and Meg Crane, my guests on this episode of the Page and Stage podcast, where we explore the art and craft of writing and performance. And as always, I'm your host, Jason Cannon. And this week we dig deep into the intersection of art and science, the history and theatrical retelling of the invention of the first home pregnancy test, and the guts it takes to shatter the glass ceiling. Now, before we get to all that, a brief Page and Stage plug. This podcast is only one part of my story coaching work. You can check out everything I'm up to over at pageandstage.art. That includes my other podcast, 100 Plays, my weekly Friday newsletter full of tips, tricks, inspiration, and encouragement for storytellers of all stripes, as well as my one-on-one story coaching packages. Again, that's pageandstage.art, pageandstage.art. Now, let me tell you a bit more about my awesome guests, Meg Crane and Jennifer Blackmer. This story is incredible. So Meg Crane is a historical figure you haven't heard of, but now you're going to, and then her story is that important. It's something straight out of a TV movie or a film you should see. She's an extraordinarily inspiring and humble woman who had an incredible career. She was actually like in a graphic design, but she is the reason we have at-home pregnancy tests. She really is. She's the one that saw the science. You'll hear the story. She saw the science and said, why don't we do it this way? And now we have that. And this story was lost. It was buried. It was actually, shocker, attributed to a man for a long time. But then the playwright Jennifer Blackmer came along. Jennifer is a professor at Ball State in Muncie, Indiana, and a wonderful playwright. And she and Meg met. They've become friends. They have a production of the play Predictor coming out in January, actually in December. My recording schedule's so wonky sometimes. It'll all be in the show notes. You can get tickets if you're up in New York this winter. Be sure to check out the show. My friend Carly, who helped us put up Clowns Like Me off Broadway last summer, she is the one who introduced me to Meg and Jen, and I'm so glad she did. I know this story will impact you as strongly as it did me. My jaw, if you're watching this on video, you'll see my jaw's on the floor like half the time. So, and even though it is about sciencey stuff, the intersection of art and science is really fascinating. And the way this play came to be, this is work I do all the time too, taking true stories and turning them into theatrical experiences. I am fascinated by this stuff. I'm sure you will be too. You can read all about their bios and all of their credits and everything else in the show notes, but let's get to it. Here we go with my conversation with Meg Crane and Jennifer Blackmer. Okay, so one more quick note. My apologies for interrupting the typical intro here, but I had some technical difficulties during this particular recording. So if you're watching this on YouTube, you are likely to see a couple maybe little video cuts or glitches where my camera fell off. I was really into the conversation, and once I accidentally clicked my microphone off, and once my camera went off, and the tracks were still recording my guests, but not recording me. So if you're listening to this just on audio, it's probably far less egregious, although you may hear some audio mixing funkiness just because I had to splice a few things together. And that means sometimes the mix doesn't always carry from one export to the other. Anyway, I won't get into all the technicalities, but I just wanted to give you all a heads up that if you hear some glitches or see some glitches, it's not you, it's me, and the interview still goes through pretty cleanly, but I just wanted to own those glitches up front and let you know it's all okay. And yeah, so here we go again with my conversation with Meg Crane and Jennifer Blackmer. And after a little struggle with phone call on live chat, we got all three of us here together live online. I am here with Jennifer Blackmer and Meg Crane. And my goodness, this is really exciting. So my good friend Carly, who was manager on Clowns Like Me off Broadway a couple years ago, or 1 year ago, last summer. Time.
Well, no, time doesn't anymore. We can't remember time. It's true. Yeah, gone.
But she now is working on the play Predictor, which has a production coming up at AMT Theater in New York, just a couple blocks west of Times Square in the theater district. And Jen is the playwright, and Meg is the brilliant historical figure about whom the play was written. This is really cool. So,
Cool.
Jen and Meg, thanks so much for being with me today.
So happy to be here, Jason.
Really.
Thanks for the thanks for the invitation.
Absolutely. So, Meg, let's start with you. So, because again, this is one of those things where you don't know it until you're told you don't know it. But you invented the first home pregnancy diagnostic test back in 1967.
Yes.
And I just want to give you a long runway here, Meg. Like, what motivated you to do that? What was the process of doing that? What were some of the obstacles in achieving that? And kind of follow-up question, once you did kind of bring that into existence for us, what was the fallout?
Oh, okay. Well, I have to start by saying that I did not invent the pregnancy test. People get that confused because if I did, it would have been a mess because I'm not a scientist. I can't do that. And so I only found a way that the existing pharmaceutical test could be put together in a format that women could do themselves. So that was the difference. Yeah.
Okay, so just to be really clear, so the science-y stuff already existed.
Exactly.
And you adapted it, you translated it into a form whereby someone could do it on their own at home as opposed to having to go in for an appointment.
Exactly. That was the whole idea. Yeah.
Okay, so if you weren't the scientist, what were you up to before you took this on?
Well, I was hired by a pharmaceutical company in Jersey, a long way away from me, and in New York, traveling there. But they wanted me to work on some new women's products they were bringing on. They never had before. So that's what happened. So I was into the laboratory one day when I saw these test tubes hanging over a funny metallic metal surface, and asked somebody, well, what's that? And they said, well, those are pregnancy tests that the doctors, send samples of a urine here to us and we test them. So that was the company's, one of the things they did. It was a big thing for them. So, and looking at that, I thought, well, that looks pretty easy. Test tube, and maybe a reflective surface like a mirror, something like that. But I just thought, wow, maybe women could have this. That was my light bulb kind of moment, sort of. That was very important to me. And then from then on, it was like compulsive. I had to go with this and all that.
So this is interesting. So, because that's one of those small things that's much larger than it appears, because it goes to agency, right? That as opposed to being sort of at the mercy of sending something in, having to get maybe an appointment or being a prescription, that to just have the agency. I mean, I'm sure this had to be kind of tied in. I mean, it's the 60s, right? Tied in with the pill and everything else, and just
Oh, yeah.
all that movement about women actually, being actual humans as opposed to,
Right. Yeah.
is that part of what you were experiencing when this obvious to your mind simple thing was hanging there, and it was just kind of a, couldn't we do this at home? Or was there resistance to that when you brought the idea forward?
Well, before the resistance, just my idea about that, I thought women needed this. Women needed this, period. And so when I brought the idea to the company, they kind of laughed and said, "Well, we can't do that. We'd lose our business, our doctor business." So, right? So, and other business, and it's immoral, it's terrible, you're a bad woman, you're thinking about things like this, and the only women who really want to know quickly if they, and this is quick, so you would be able to pick up this little test, and in 2 hours at that point you would know that you're pregnant or not, right? So
2 hours.
2 hours, 2 hours. Yeah. As opposed to 2 weeks or 3 weeks if you had to go to get a doctor's appointment
Right.
and get it to the lab, and they would get back to the doctor and the doctor get back to you. So 2 hours is nothing, right? At that time.
Isn't that so funny, Megs? There's something about the power of time there, right? Because that even goes to agency and whose control you're under, right? That if you have to wait 2 to 3 weeks, are
Yeah.
you actually in control of yourself? And 2 hours to me, of course, today, that sounds like 2 hours. It's like 20 seconds now.
Exactly. It's nothing now. So, yeah. But that has to be. I mean, the new test, the present test is a beautiful little machine. It's a totally different process. And it works very quickly and doesn't need to have any rabbit blood or sheep blood or things like that, which my test did have to have.
Whoa, okay. Jen, I'm going to get to you in a second because I can only imagine what's included and not included in a play version of this story. And I'm just imagining a props mistress going, "You want rabbit blood?"
Yes.
And Jason, it is a comedy, so kind of keep that in mind too as you're
Yeah.
going.
Right.
That's the right modality, Jen. That's where you want this to live, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so Meg, you have this idea, and my gosh, you said that they laughed you out of the room and they called you immoral. I
Oh,
mean, this just goes again to the whole power dynamic that
no.
that we wish no longer existed. But how did you then kind of push through? Did you have to demonstrate the financial benefit to them? Did you have to demonstrate? What was your process to get them to stop laughing and actually consider it?
Well, first of all, I said, well, I'll find a way to, make this happen. So I worked out a prototype and eventually brought it to one of the executives, and he sort of said, "Oh, well, really, this looks like something for for very wealthy women because we certainly can't afford to make this, and it's going to cost a fortune." Now they're softening a little bit by saying, "Well, whatever." So I had to be very careful and pick my moments to bring things up, that kind of stuff, and of course, there are a whole bunch of executives in the company that really thought if a woman needs to know quickly, that means she's not a good woman. She's not like, that's the part. That's really, right. Why would she want to know this quickly? Right. A major part of this. So I eventually took one of the executives to New York City to meet Howard Moody, who was the minister of a big church in New York, and he at the time was working. And this was in the '60s and even '50s with religious people across the country, like rabbis and ministers, to finally work out getting safe abortions for women who actually needed them. And so I took this executive to meet this man, and he saw it and he said, "Well, he was quite intrigued by the test itself." And he said, "Well, look, I'll buy them here. So any of my parishioners need these, they're going to have them." So, and then he went to his local Westchester expensive area minister who said, "Well, that sounds like a good idea to me." So that was, that took some of the edge off the immoral part of the story. Right.
Right. If you've got a minister going, "This is good. This is a
Yeah.
good idea." that kind of blows up. Yeah. Yeah.
I didn't tell the executive this church was the most left-wing radical church in the country. So
Oh, you're a sneaky one, Meg.
what else can you do? Right.
Oh
Anyway,
man. So you're step by step getting these executives to come on board.
yeah.
What was kind of the final turning point where they signed on, or they thought that they could make it financially viable for themselves, sell it to investors, whatever? Like, what was the point where you knew you had them?
Well, it wasn't me myself, but actually a couple of executives go to the Netherlands, the parent company, very big, big corporate company in the Netherlands. Was there, and they went for maybe 2 meetings a year, to present things. And one of the executives kind of laughingly said, well, somebody in our company thought it'd be nice to make a consumer test. And the Dutch thought this was a great idea. So they said, well, we'd like to do a little test. Here's some money, do a market test and go back and work it out. So that's how it happened. And of course I had my prototype at that point, and it didn't even go smoothly at this point because the executives forgot to tell me that this was happening, and they hired some bunch of men to do prototypes for this, and there was a big meeting about it. This is a whole story. I don't want to bore you with this whole business, but
This is amazing.
you know. So it took some time. It took a lot of back and forth, So
And we have the Dutch finally to thank. And Meg, the follow-up question obviously is, how many rabbits did you personally kill to get the blood you needed to do your prototypes?
tell you this other part of the story, because when I was hired, this company had a big laboratory, big building, in New Jersey. And the first day I went there, they said, well, you're not going to work in this building. They brought me to a little house, like a consumer house on the grounds, because they were going to be tearing down 2 houses to build a bigger, expand a little bit, let's see. But they thought they're going to put the women's products in this little house. So I'm there, and I'm by myself with a secretary to some of the executives, and the 2 of us are in this house by ourselves. She's in the dining room and I'm in the living room. And one day I hear this terrible screaming, absolutely horrible screaming. I said, what, Matt, what's going on? She said, don't you know about the rabbits? And she said, they're down the basement. They bleed them for the tests that they do here. And it was actually, eventually asked somebody to go down with me so I could see them. And as soon as you go down those little stairs to the basement, they're shaking their cages as big white rabbits. And they're screaming and shaking, and oh, what a racket it makes. It's incredible. But, they needed to use at that time. That was the process for pregnancy testing,
Wow.
yeah.
It reminds me of that scene in Schitt's Creek where they're trying to like find the wedding venue and they hear the pigs being slaughtered. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
All right. So Meg, so the Dutch come in, infuse the cash. Other people are doing the actual prototypes and stuff. How does it kind of wrap up? What's that kind of in the movie version where like you're in the boardroom and you slam your fist and you've won, right? If there even was that moment, but what's the moment where finally it culminated with this thing is happening and going to market for women?
Okay. So I hear that they're going to have a meeting with these product designers the next day from when I heard about this, to discuss with all the executives, going forward and all that sort of thing. And so I go to that meeting, I crash the meeting kind of, and I bring my prototype. And these 3 guys, there they have their 3 designs. They put theirs on the conference table, and I put mine down too. And so in comes the advertising agency people that they hired for this. And the first person I see is this tall, wonderful looking guy that I have to tell you, I was just amazingly, I can't explain
Swoon.
it. And he walks in the room, he looks at all the tests that are, the prototypes, picks mine up, and he says, well, this is the only one we're using, right? They said, oh no, that's just something Meg did for talking purposes. I still remember that line and the person who said it. And And not that that was my idea or anything. And they said, we can't do that. It's too expensive. Bye-bye, goodbye. And so poor Ira, this man had to interview the other designers, which he did, all their ideas. And so I took off from work, and next couple of days, I'm a freelancer, by the way. So, and, and I go to the yellow pages. We didn't have computers at that point. And I found plastic manufacturers. And after one or two sending me to other places, I found somebody who could do this. I didn't tell them what it's for, but can they make this thing, right?
Can you make me this shape or this receptacle for what price? Yeah.
And what would it cost? And so it turns out where I went was much less than the professional people's products. So they had to use mine. And at this point, this wonderful man, Ira, and I start working together as, the team to go forward with this. And so that's how we started. And then a few months later, he's living with me. So there we are. No.
Oh, it's a love story, Meg.
Yes, it's that too. We were together for 41 years after that. So, before he died. So,
wow, man, it just kind of goes to show that history, we can think, oh, this thing was invented, and but this was months, it sounds like, of a process and constant setbacks and constantly being dismissed until finally the thing that really, in a real way, helps fundamentally alter the world and our experience in the world finally comes out. As the test kept evolving and getting more effective, were you at all part of that? Or once your part was played, did you move on to other things?
Well, that took a little bit of obviously doing, let's say, and so Ira and I were working together our own business at this point, and I'm still working for the company, and the head guy, who's actually vice president, called us one day on a Thursday and said, "Can I come in and talk with you tonight?" And when he did, he said, because of the Dutch, we have to do a market test. And this is Thursday night. And I would really have to have everything about marketing in Canada on my desk on Monday morning. So we did it. It was a weekend, but we got the whole thing worked out. And that's Ira's brilliance, too. I mean, he really knew from advertising, how to go about this. And so we got the job. So we did the marketing for Canada. And meanwhile, before that, they'd asked me to sign off on patents using my name. And they would pay me $1, which would be a token thing. And I agreed to that, but I never got the $1 either. But I did get my name on the patents. So that's pretty nice.
I don't even. You didn't get the $1. That's just okay. All right.
Yeah, Jason, and think about
they didn't have $1 to give me.
This is Jen. Think about how many women have used a consumer pregnancy test. I mean, and that's the other thing about this that is, you mentioned world changing, right? So to not even be given the token $1 that Meg was promised for all this work is just beyond beyond that.
It's still beyond.
It's almost a perfect metaphorical encapsulation of the whole dang process, right?
Yes. In ways, you're right. That's kind of like, and on top of it, this didn't happen, right? It's kind of like, yeah.
Okay, so Meg, thank you for all this. And I'm going to come back to you in just a little bit. But Jen, as the playwright, how did you and Meg meet? Or how did this story come to your attention in the first place? Did you meet Meg first? Did you find the story, then pursue her? Or like, how did this play, be, I almost said get birthed.
Well, and that is very accurate. That's very accurate. It's the second, Jason. It was the second. So there was a series in the Times called "Who Made That?" and written by a wonderful writer named Pagan Kennedy, and she would do these sort of short essays about these everyday objects that you use all the time and you never thought about their origin. There was a Ziploc bag, there was sort of a disposable razor. I mean, all of these things that we kind of take for granted. And so in 2012, I think it was, she did one about the home pregnancy test, who made that home pregnancy test. And in that article, it states that the home pregnancy test was invented by a gentleman who was working for Insight Pharmaceuticals. And it was the EPT, the early pregnancy test, and it came to the market in 1978. And so, there you go. And meanwhile, Meg saw that and decided that, her part in this needed to be known, right? And so you reached out to Pagan, is that correct, Meg?
Actually, my what started my brother Peter, other people in my family kept saying, "You've got to do something about this. This
Ah,
is
okay, yeah.
And so he called the Smithsonian, and they were after me to give it to them, give them the prototype and all this kind of stuff. And then it went back to Pagan Kennedy, who realized
Right.
he was going to auction off the prototype, and she found that and wrote the better story, which
Yeah.
I have to thank her for. That was really a longer, more detailed story about what happened. That's what you
Yeah.
did, and
And that was the one that I read. Yeah.
hmm,
So that one came out in 2016. So, meanwhile, Meg had the prototype in the Smithsonian and all of that. And it's a lovely article. You can still find it online. And the title is Can Women Be Trusted with Their Own Pregnancy Test? And so, meanwhile, here I am sitting on my back porch here in Indiana. I live in Muncie and I'm a playwright. I teach at Ball State University. And I read this article and it's sort of like feminist clickbait. I see that and I was like, yes, I can be trusted. And so I read this story, and it's the story that Meg just told, and basically this idea that she was a graphic designer working for Organon Pharmaceuticals in 1967, and she saw these tests in the lab and figured out, because she's a designer, she was able to figure out how to take this piece of science and make it accessible, right? And so as a writer, I have always been interested in stories of women, of course, and also women in science, and also the intersection of art and science. And to
Mm.
me, that really resonated with Meg's story. And the sort of the centerpiece of the article was what you just heard Meg talk about the conference room, right? So you have these designers who've been commissioned to make prototypes, and they're brought into this big official meeting. Meanwhile, Meg, who has been dismissed at every turn, has the guts to sneak into this meeting and put her design at the end of the row of these prototypes. And then, Ira Sturdivant comes in and he looks at her design and he's like, well, naturally, this is the one we're going with. And Meg was saying that the others were just not even feasible. And they were putting all of these sort of embellishments on them. So there were like tassels and little, flower stencils. This is on a thing you're gonna pee in. I mean, so, so
Like
just what happened.
I was literally going to say, did they have, thinking I would be, but this is why you had to make it a
No,
comedy, because every
yes,
ridiculous thing I've thought you have confirmed actually happened.
absolutely, absolutely, absolutely. And so that was the first thing that sort of occurred to me as I was reading the story. I could sort of envision this happening. And meanwhile, I have a good friend and colleague that I've been working with for many years. He's a producer and he works in both film and theater. And he was responsible for helping me get the rights to do the stage adaptation of Margaret Atwood's novel, Alias Grace. And so I had worked with him for many years. And so I read this article and I sent it to him like immediately. And I said, I love this story. And then I said, I think it's a musical. And then I know. And then about 5 minutes later, I got a text back from him and he goes, I love this story, but it's not a musical. So that was the origin of the idea. And so then Brian Nitzkin, who is producing the New York production as well, began the process of tracking down Meg Crane. And so he first went to the New York Times, and they were, too much and too expensive. And so he's like, well, Meg is, still living in New York, so why don't I try and find her? And so he did. He actually messaged her on Facebook, of all things. And we were, correct me if I'm wrong, Meg, but I know you had a lot of movie offers, but we were the only play. Is that right?
Yes, that's right. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So because we were interested in a play, because obviously I'm a playwright, we kind of stuck out. And so Meg contacted Brian back and said, so, tell me more about this. And then I had been traveling for something entirely unrelated, and Brian calls me and he goes, so guess what we're doing on Friday? And I said, what? Because I had sent him this, and I didn't even think it was possible. I thought for sure that everybody would be, pouncing on this. And Brian's like, well, on Friday, we're going to have a conference call with Margaret Crane. And I was like, wait, you mean the inventor of the consumer pregnancy test? And he goes, yeah. And in the meantime, Meg had kind of become a little hero of mine. And so I was like freaking out. I was like, oh my God, it was a conference call, but I'm thinking, what am I going to wear? That kind of thing. So we got on the phone and just kind of got to know each other a little bit. We're sort of feeling each other out a little bit. And so I had sent Meg a couple of my plays so she could kind of get an idea of who I am and what I like to do and sort of how I tell stories. And you talk a lot. We've already kind of hit upon time here just in general, but as a playwright, I am fascinated with space and time. I was almost a scientist. I actually almost went into physics. And so just the way that certain stories play with the space of the theater as well as the space, the world of the play, right? This where the story is contained, but then also time as an entity and as a device that we can play with. That's actually very malleable in the theater space. So, those were sort of represented in my plays. And then we just talked more and more. We got on the phone several times, and then we exchanged emails back and forth. And then we decided to do this thing. And that has been truly, Jason, I've said this many times, but that has been the biggest gift of this whole experience, is just getting to know Meg and have her in my life. And we actually got to hang out. I got to celebrate her birthday when I was in New York just a few days ago. And it's just been such an incredible joy. And so there's a responsibility. There's a tremendous responsibility toward telling this story in a way that is, certainly engaging, but also, because Meg has been a part of this process, I think really honoring her contributions and her journey and this sort of arduous process that ultimately did result in a paradigm shift for women's health, right? So it's been amazing. Probably the most nervous I've ever been in my life is after several months of discussions and interviews and stuff, I sort of told Brian that I think I was ready to kind of go away for a little bit and just sort of do the thing. And it was as I was working through the play and trying to figure out what it was and how I was going to tell the story, it occurred to me that the play itself, it's a memory play, but it takes place, the action of the play takes place in the 3 seconds that it takes Meg to decide to sign that patent application and to sign the rights to the test away to Organon, right? So that's the way the play begins. That's also the way the play ends. And it's all the things that would be occurring to somebody who is ready to make like a momentous decision, right? To either maintain control over this thing that you've created or to give it away. And so Meg's decision to give it away for the greater good was just profound to me. And as soon as I figured that out, then the play sort of, happened. And I have never been more nervous than when I gave that early draft to Meg. And I said, so here's what I'm thinking. And so I emailed it to her, and then we didn't hear for a few days. And then Brian got back to me and says, well, she's got some notes. And apparently I got like a date. But apparently I got like a date wrong. And I think that was about it. And then we kind of started on the journey together. It was really pretty outstanding. It was a wonderful moment.
Oh, Jen, that brings back a memory. So one of the reasons this is so interesting to me to talk to the two of you is that some of the work I do, I interview people in the mental health lane, and they tell their stories of struggling with mental illness, and I help them turn those into basically one person shows. And that nervousness you just described, Jen, that my first one I did for my good friend Scotty, I interviewed him and his parents, and it was time for the first read through. And he and I are about the same age. So I actually, in their condo, I read to Scotty and his parents. I read it out loud to them on their couch. And it was the most nerve-wracking, like, oh no, I've dishonored everybody.
Right. Yeah. And especially, I mean, by highlighting, I think, some of the ridiculous nature of what was going on. That's why I said it actually has turned into a comedy for a number of reasons. I think the most important one being that it ends in a place of hope. And for me, it has to. I am a deeply, deeply passionate and committed feminist playwright. And as far as I am concerned, in these stories that are told, there's so many women in the world, both now and in the past, who are doing incredible things. And to me, I think the way to make change is to highlight that, right? And the power that we all have to, in fact, change the world. And it's hard and it's difficult, but it's so important and it's so worthy. And once we realize, I think through the process of sharing this story together, that some of the obstacles that are put up in front of us, along with the ones that we put up in front of ourselves, are in fact kind of ridiculous. And when you begin thinking about the importance of what it is that you're doing, whether that be inventing a consumer pregnancy test, writing a play, you begin to realize that it really is all about connecting with other human beings, like, making a thing that will make their lives easier and give women autonomy over, over their bodies, or something, in the case of what we do in sharing stories, making connections with people that can, in fact, maybe change their minds or encourage them to go deeper into something they may care about or disagree with even. I think all of these things that we do to connect to other human beings are crucial.
Yeah, and to your point there, Jen, most of us are not kings or queens or emperors. We can't wave a wand. We can't by decree. We can't rule by fiat, right? But we can still change the world. We just don't know we're doing it when we're doing it. Like the small moments, like something as small as I'm going to sneak in my example here and not only win the contract, but meet my husband. Right? And you don't know
much,
in the moment when you're changing the world, for the vast majority of us, we have no idea that it's happening when it's happening, which is why I kind of love this thing you're doing with time. Like, this is a moment that in the moment, you don't know what it's really going to do.
No.
50 years from now, you don't realize that this thing you do is going to change the world. It's going to impact millions, because to think that I'm about to impact millions of people would be debilitating. We would be paralyzed. If we had that knowledge, none of us would do anything. You know what I mean? So that's where I think telling the story, Jen, is so important, is that through the story, we can kind of access, what we do has impact. But if we knew what the impact was in a moment, most of us wouldn't have the guts to do it.
Right, because you're not thinking that way. And I'm so lucky, and so many little steps along the way. But I'm super lucky that Jen came along. How could I be luckier? She's perfect for all this, and that's absolutely the case, really.
Yeah, so dig into that a little bit more. You mentioned process a couple times, Jen. And so you did your interviewing. I'm sure that meant a lot of conversations with Meg, background research,
Hmm.
all that good stuff,
Yep.
doing your investigative journalism, all of that. And then you go
Yes.
away and do the writer thing in the cave, right? Um,
Yes.
but in terms of the process between the two of you, like Meg, I'll start with you. Um, what kind of say did you want any say? Like, did you say cast them, not them? Did you have any like who gets to play me? This is very important. Like, how much kind of artistic input did you have, if any? Or like you just said, once you met Jen and had this complete trust in this playwright, did you just kind of act
Well,
as consultant?
but she started off by asking me questions, and about my background a little bit, and what I was doing there, and they went on for quite some time. So I was able to write all this stuff about, little background for her to have. And that kind of, it almost is very funny, but what you're saying too made me realize something about what I was doing there that mattered more than I thought, let's say. And because the answer to these questions kind of gave me a little bit more perspective on what I'd been doing. And
Mm.
that was really helpful, and very much so. And I didn't want to put all these men. There was all men running this company in that big meeting in the conference room. It was all men. Not even one single woman was there. They didn't even have one of the secretaries come in and take notes or whatever. And I thought that's a very interesting thing. Did they really think they had to be secluded in a male sort of way, to deal with this? And I wasn't going to be there as far as they were concerned. So, but
Mm.
there's still things I think about an awful lot about, and that was in the '60s. And you're right too about the the pill coming up, and this and through the '60s, and the whole upside downness of sex and what's going on
Mm.
in social life for everybody. And we had how many assassinations in that period of time? There was
Yeah. Yeah.
incredibly turmoil, and so it seemed to me like a pretty good time to bring something up that would be useful. Slip it in, whatever it happens
Mm.
to be. That's kind of, um,
It was important to me as we began sort of talking, and I was interviewing Meg and asking her a lot of questions. We did both interviews like this, talking to one another. We actually got to see each other in person.
yes, thank you.
Brian flew Meg out to Muncie to
Yes,
hang out in Muncie,
that was
which
great. That was a wonderful time. Yeah.
yeah, and she got to hear a reading of one of my other plays and meet my students and all of that, and which was just wonderful. So we got to meet each other in person, and we had a couple
Mhm.
of sort of interview sessions then. It was also important for me via email to sort of see Meg's voice and experience it in writing as well, which was very helpful in developing the character on the page, right? To make sure that the language was accurate, and especially the sense of humor, which is so important, and it's really important to the character as well. And it's funny because I also, after getting to know Meg as well as I was able to in the first sort of 8 months to a year we were working together, I felt comfortable sort of inserting some of my own kind of sense of humor in there as well, because we're kind of similar. I think
Yeah.
so. She laughs at what I laugh, and vice versa. So that was pretty cool too, to discover that, because as you know, I mean, every play that you write is also a part of yourself, right? And so the issues that Meg dealt with in the '60s, I dealt with early in my career in academia as well. And it's sad that it is still, the women all over are still fighting the same fight, regardless of where they are. They're fighting for legitimacy and recognition, along with, important things like bodily autonomy. And so what has been really powerful for me too during this process is we finished, and to say finish, it's always in air quotes, right? So we had a draft that was more or less ready for production in 2019. And I was very grateful that the play was chosen for presentation for the National New Play Network for their showcase.
Oh,
And
wow.
so
Great.
it was a part of the showcase in and I say this in italics, in November 2019.
Oh,
So unfortunately, we had
yep.
I would say fortunately we
Excuse
had
me.
really great interest, and it was just such a wonderful reception. And so after that reading, I think that's when Brian and I both realized we had something pretty special, just the way people responded to it. And then, so we had several confirmed productions at that point, and then of course the world shut down. So it took us about 3 years, including the time in the pandemic, to sort of restart, all of the things, because the industry itself was shut down, and so many theater companies struggled. And so, even a play with 7 characters like Predictor was really difficult to get going.
Yeah.
And so luckily we were able to sort of put together a little semblance of what we would have had in the 2020 season. That happened in 2023. So beyond that, the reception's been really pretty outstanding. And Meg has had a chance to see several productions across the country now. And this production coming up is in Meg's hometown.
In
so
her
that's
backyard.
even
That's
better.
right.
Yeah, I know. That's the best.
Meg, what is it like to watch this play? What is it like to, like, I can only imagine, do you make it known that you're in the audience? Do actors not want to know? Do the audience want to know? And what is your feeling? I'm sure it probably changes production to production,
Oh yeah,
but what's it like to watch your life theatricalized?
it's quite, the first play was in Lincoln, Nebraska, which was wonderful. I mean, I was so happy to meet people there. It was a great reception as far as the idea of the play, and I always wonder if it's annoying for the actor to think I might be watching. Maybe they're thinking it's not coming off the way I would like or something, and that's not the case. So, and it's been in so many different productions that each one, of course, is different. There's a different take, and the actors take a different approach to the roles, and that's also interesting. That's kind of so I do sometimes speak after talk back, and that's wonderful because some of the audience members have the wonderful stories to tell. I mean, it really fills out for me like what this was all about. These people were experiencing this and telling me how it worked for them. And well, that is just, you don't get that chance very often to see something you did, to somebody's actual life. And sometimes even men whose wives had already died and telling me how they knew their first child was coming and all that sort of thing. So it's kind of
There's also something wonderful, truly wonderful about offering Meg a standing ovation, which happens pretty much every time she's in the house. There's just something, and granted, it would be great if we could have $1 for every person standing in the audience, but there's, the fact that this story was not told for so long. And now that it has been told, it's like a crucible of not only the moment in 1967, 8, and 9 when this was happening, but also now, right? And in to say, we were still coming out of the pandemic in 2022 when Roe versus Wade was struck down, and I had several messages from friends that day when it happened saying, well, your play is now a hell of a lot more relevant, because it's not only were they talking about striking down a woman's right to choose, but also access to birth control and, access to healthcare that we need. And it's very close, everything that happens. I mean, you think a home pregnancy test is a thing that you can go buy at the pharmacy, pee on a stick, and that's that, right? It's just so ingrained in the way we function, as women of reproductive age. But it had to be created, it had to be made, and if it is made, it can also be taken away. And that's kind of where we're at right now. And it's very scary, but it's scary. It also lends the play a tremendous immediacy and urgency for the people who see it.
Yeah, I can only imagine.
Yeah.
I had one quick last question, Jen, before I turn to the wrap up here at the spotlight. But the title struck me as interesting. Predictor. Because is it so? Without giving away, I mean, we kind of had the gist of the plot, obviously, but without giving away something that people who are going to see the play, you don't want to ruin the surprise. Why is it predictor and not like reflector or reporter? Or it's not predict. But I'm just curious about that particular use of the word when is it actually predicting? I'm just curious thematically. That's just really intriguing to me as a fellow playwright, because it's more like you're taking an observational report as opposed to, but maybe you mean something different by predict. I don't know. I'm just kind of riffing, but I'm curious. I
love it. I love it because it's the name of the test, right?
It was the first test. Yeah.
Oh, that was the name of the test. Okay.
Yeah.
Yep.
But as you state, right, there is also a metaphor in the moment of recognition. And in the play, right, we talk about when Meg saw those tests and was immediately struck by this idea that she had a visit from her muse, right? And so when that happens, as you state, as we talked about earlier in our conversation, you don't know what's going to happen as a result of these choices and these decisions that you made. But if you are resilient, if you push for the thing you really want, you can in fact predict where you might end up. And in this instance, we ended up in a better place because of what Meg did.
Wow, cool. All right, I could just keep going. This is so fascinating. I appreciate you both so much, and I don't think you're wrong, Jen. You two strike me as sisters from another mother. Although I also must say, Jen, I don't know, Pee on a Stick and That's It. That's a really great show tune. I think. I don't know.
Exactly. Yes, I know.
That's the next stage. The next stage is going to be that musical that you've been.
There you go.
All this time.
Oh my gosh. So good. All right, so I'm going to turn to my little spotlight here, and I sent you a couple questions in advance. So I'll just bounce back and forth. I love this question. If you could ask any one person any one question, who would that person be, and what would you ask? And Jen, I'll start with you.
Wow. So I went back and forth with this because obviously there's so many people in my life who I am just so incredibly grateful for. And I'm going to give you two answers. I'm going to cheat. The first one is I would love to talk to my mother who died 15 years ago and just thank her for my life and for everything she did for me. And I guess I would ask her if she's proud of me, but I think I already know the answer to that.
So.
And then the more intellectual version of this is there's an author who I'm kind of obsessed with right now, Ted Chiang, who writes short stories. And there's the movie Arrival, if you saw that, is based on one of his short stories called The Story of Your Life. And everything he's written, I love, just love. And so I would love to have a process conversation with him and basically ask him, how do you do such beautiful things in your storytelling? That's what I would like to know.
Awesome. Ted, if you're listening.
I'll send him a
Come on.
copy.
Yeah, yeah. Meg, what about you? One person, one question. Who would it be and what would you ask?
Well, I sent you something I won't mention. I guess really I would love to go back and be able to talk to my grandmother more in depth about her beginnings and everything about her. And that's certainly what I'd like to know now. I wish I could find that now, but I can't. There's no way
Yeah.
to go back. So
Yeah.
Yes. Great. Next question. What is the best advice that you have ever taken, Jen?
The best advice is in the book that I make all of my writing students buy. It's called Bird by Bird by Anne Lamott.
Oh yeah.
And the best advice I ever received that completely changed my writing process is the concept of the first draft. You can bleep that out. So I will say the crappy first draft, but it is in fact the title of the chapter is the first draft. And the
Yes, it
fact
is.
that in order to be a good writer, you have to let yourself be a bad writer. And I was such a perfectionist when I was a kid and a high schooler and even a college student that the idea that I would write something bad was like paralyzing to me, and it really kept me away from the process that would eventually serve me. So everybody, if you want to write, you should purchase that book. You should read it again and again and again. It's called Bird by Bird, Some Thoughts on Writing and Life by Anne Lamott.
It is
It is a great
so good.
Yeah.
It's a second and a third right there. Bang, bang.
Yep. Yeah.
Meg, what's the best advice you've ever taken?
I guess probably to switch to graphic design while I was still in art school, as opposed to fashion illustration, which I was taking at the time, because that's just practical stuff. At that point in the 50s, late 50s, almost all the stores are going to photography instead of illustration for their ads. And it would have been very hard to make a living just doing illustrations. So graphic design, though I loved anyway, and I was always intrigued by the students that were doing that. And I was one of 3 young women in the whole graphic design department with lots of guys. But it was okay. Nobody bothered me. And I was really happy about doing that. It was good change. Yeah.
Great. Jen and Meg, both of you, thank you so much. This last little bit here, just let the listeners or the viewers know, like if you're on social media, do you have a website? Where should they go to learn more about you or read your work? I'll for sure put direct links in the show notes to, I have your website, Jen. There'll be a direct link. I'm going to put direct links to the show at AMT Theater, how to get tickets. If you are in New York in December and January, go check out Predictor. Yeah, where can anyone go learn more about you or read your work? Jen.
Obviously, the website, as you mentioned, also New Play Exchange. I'm a big fan of New Play Exchange. You can find excerpts of my work on New Play Exchange. And coming up, we have a production of my play Borrowed Babies is happening at American Lives Theater in February of 2026. And productions of my solo show, I Carry Your Heart With Me, will be in Savannah, Georgia, and Birmingham, Alabama, shortly after the new year.
Awesome. Solo show. Are you performing that or is someone else performing?
No. I am not an actor. I am not an actor. But yes, by solo show, I decided to try writing a show for one actor, probably because I like to do things if something scares me. And so the form itself, I found a little difficult sometimes. I mean, I had seen some bad solo shows. I'd also seen some incredible solo shows, and I was like, well, I wonder if I could do this. And I did, and I created a piece I'm extremely proud of. So won the a citation from the ATCA Steinberg Foundation last year. So
awesome.
Great.
Congrats. I'll put links to all that right in the show notes. Meg, I know that you were basically stalked on Facebook for Jen to meet you. So I'll find you on Facebook, Meg. But do you have a website or another place people can learn more about you?
Well, I do have an Instagram account, which I'm being pushed now to put some of my cartoons on it because I haven't been where, so I have to do that. So maybe by the end of the week I'll have them available.
Oh, and they're
You know.
funny and hilarious and so well done. Oh my gosh, I love it so much.
Fantastic. Oh, my goodness. Jen and Meg, thank you both so much. Thank you for sharing your friendship, for sharing your life story, for sharing your work. Everybody, check out the show notes, the tickets for Predictor at AMT Theater in January and February. Thank you both so very much.
Thank you, Jason.
Thank you,
Thanks very much for
Jason.
you asking wonderful questions.
You've been listening to the Page and Stage podcast. All my thanks to this week's guest and to all of you out there for listening. You can learn more about all my guests and access their websites and projects in the show notes. If you enjoyed or found value in this podcast, I'd like to ask a quick favor. Leaving a short review or comment helps me out a ton. It tells the algorithmic overlords that people are listening, and it helps other folks discover the show. So if you can post a review over at Apple Podcasts, and I've left a link and easy instructions in the show notes, or leave a comment on this episode on Substack or YouTube, wherever you happen to be listening or watching, I would be incredibly grateful. I use an incredible online app, Riverside.fm, to produce this podcast. If you are interested in creating your own podcast or other audio or video content, I cannot recommend them highly enough. I left a link in the show notes so you can check them out for yourself. Both of my podcasts live over at pageandstage.art, and if you visit, you can even sign up for free to receive every future episode right into your inbox, as well as my weekly newsletter full of tips, tricks, inspiration, and encouragement for storytellers of all stripes. Again, that's pageandstage.art. Thank you again for listening. And until next time, I'm Jason Cannon, and I cannot wait to hear your story.